Is this Green Stuff World hobby paint shaker better than a Vortex mixer? Well, I'm going to leave that for you to judge, but I'm going to explain why I bought this instead of a Vortex mixer. Now, before we do that, let's have a look at the details of the Green Stuff World hobby paint shaker. So you can get this on the Green Stuff World website for just under 20 euros, which is about 20 quid. I don't know the exact how much I paid for it, but I did pay for this with my own money. It's not a review copy or anything like that, so there's no bias here, apart from my own personal biases, I guess. And the idea is relatively simple. It's a battery powered shaker, so you literally just plug it in, charge it, unplug it, and then use it, right? It comes in a few different bits. It comes with the main like body of it, a little clip that goes in the top of the shaker, which you can't seemingly remove once you put it in, and I think that's intentional. And then it comes with these 3 attachments. These are relating to the size of your paint pot. So you basically have like a Games Workshop sized paint pot holder, an Army Painter Vallejo kind of pot holder as well, and then you have a small one which is for, I think, like pens, paint pens, that kind of thing. And as I said, the idea is simple. You put one of your paints into those holders, you put the holder onto the end of your shaker, and you do this just using sort of friction and force. Then you press the button that is located at the bottom of the device, and then the thing will spin. And it has 3 settings, sort of like a slow, medium, and fast, or you can press and hold to turn it off at any time, right? So that's what it does. That's how it works. Now, the reason I personally bought this is that my hobby room is this room that I'm in, which I have my computer in and I have my wife's computer in here. And quite frankly, it's a UK box room. I can literally probably hold both of the walls at once if I really, really wanted to. Like, there's not much room in here at all. And I'm a bit of a messy person. I don't keep it very tidy, so it's very cluttered. I bought this so that I can literally store it like this, store the attachments like this, and I can very easily put that in a drawer or something. It's very, very simple, not taking up much space. I thought, great. And it's actually a little bit cheaper than the Vortex mixers. The Vortex mixers come in maybe 2 main types. You have the cheap ones from Wish or somewhere like that, generally about 20 to 35 pounds, or you can get like a more expensive one where it starts getting up to like 100 pound and probably better production value, right? So the price wise, this is pretty decent. But the main reason I actually got it was because of the size and the fact that it was battery operated. It meant I didn't have to have like a permanent space on my desk where I would then have to like find a plug. I could literally charge it, keep it in my drawer, take it out my drawer, use it. Very simple to do. Now, I don't have a Vortex mixer at the moment, so I'm just going to assume that it works quite well to shake the paints. I've seen a couple of reviews where generally you're going to have to press it and then shake it by hand a little bit, and that's okay, but it seems to work perfectly fine and reasonable. Even the cheaper sort of like Chinese versions from Wish, they seem to work perfectly fine. I've not really seen anybody complain about with it over time. But with this, there's a couple of different issues. The first one I immediately ran into was on the Games Workshop size pot. Basically, I shoved my paint in too far and it only had the lid showing, which meant it was quite difficult to get it out. And that's user error. Obviously, once you've done it once, you're not going to do it twice. Well, I actually do it twice because I wanted to show you guys and film it properly, but you're not going to intentionally do that twice. And it's actually still not hard to get out. You just have to sort of wiggle it and squeeze it and get it out, and eventually it'll come out, right? And really, that only applies, I think, with the Games Workshop pots. I think with like P3 paints, you're not going to have that issue. Obviously, Army Painter Vallejo, they're in a different tube size, and simply the holder would be very difficult to get the paint all the way in. In fact, I don't think it's possible, and even if you did, when you pulled on the lid, the bottle wouldn't open because it's a screw cap rather than the GW like lift off pot. Now, a lot of this I actually think is part of the problem because of Games Workshop paints, and really I think over time I'm probably going to move away from Games Workshop paints. I just don't think they're that good, especially for the price. Still like the contrast and stuff like that, but a lot of people do complain that they are a bit iffy. Anyway, so the problem number 1 is be careful with your Games Workshop paint. Like, if you put it too far in, you're going to have difficulty getting it out. Problem number 2 is, yes, you have to be sure that your lid is closed, because the way that this works is that it spins it around. It doesn't vibrate it like this, it spins it and spins it around. So what happens is that if your lid wasn't open, obviously the paint would just start going absolutely everywhere. Now, apart from that, what actually happened to me with my white paint was I opened the lid to see how it had got on, got a little paint from the GW pot on my thumb or my finger or something, put that then on the outside lid. Yes, the lid was closed properly, but then when I then went to next spin it again, I had that classic spinning paint effect and splash where it just like went everywhere in a line. It's quite pretty to look at, sure, but it's not really what I wanted. Now, that was sort of my fault in a way. I could have dried the pot lid. You could also say it's GW's fault in that it's very easy to get paint on yourself. Both of those I think would be reasonable. But I would like to say you do not have that issue if you're using the Army Painter dropper bottles, right? Or the Vallejo dropper bottles, because the lid is a little bit harder to get paint on. Sure, if you put paint on your lid, it would still do the same thing because it is a rotary centrifugal effect. So you just want to be careful that your bottle tops are clean. And then the third issue is sort of how well it mixes. Because it is using like centrifugal force and it's spinning around, the paint does sort of mix, but what happens is it mixes on the edges of the paint pot. It lines the side of the paint pot. Now this is mostly resolved with a little bit of a shake, because that then gets all the paint flowing and it sort of becomes nice and smooth and consistent. I will say that my Games Workshop paint, some of them went reasonably smooth and nice, like I think my Wraithbone did, but my white paint just did not. Now I think that's probably Games Workshop's white paint rather than the centrifugal force and then my personal effort, right? Because with the Vallejo dropper bottle that I tried it with, and I also tried it with an Armor Painter paint, perfectly fine, reasonable consistency. Spin it, shake it, perfectly fine, reasonable, good. But yeah, Games Workshop paint's a little bit inconsistent. But I think that was probably the paint, maybe the age of the paint and how long I've had them and stuff like that. Because obviously I'm not using fresh paint here because that's not really the test. So what you might look when you do first use it, you'll spin it, you'll open your pot and it won't be very well mixed because the liquid will be in the middle and all the paint will be on the edge, right? All the heavier stuff will be around the edge of the bottle. You give it a little bit of a shake though, and then it all sort of blends together nicely. I think you'd be better giving it a little bit of a shake, putting it in, then giving it another little bit of a shake. But at that point, what is the point of the device, depending on how much you're shaking it, right? So ultimately, those are my three sort of like points. Size wise, it's good. You do have to be careful with getting paint on your lid. And then thirdly, the actual mixing, because it's centrifugal, sort of not quite brilliant. It's decent, but I wouldn't call it amazing. My conclusion is if you are primarily using GW paint, I would probably stay away from this. I think it's just too awkward with GW pots. Sure, if you've put the GW paint into dropper bottles, crack on, but other than that, I would maybe stay away. The only reason I would personally get this over a Vortex mixer is purely because of the size and if you don't have much space. However, personally, after trying it now for a little while, I'm probably going to buy a Vortex mixer at some point, and I'm also probably going to move away from GW paints because it highlighted how frustrating they can be. It's probably worth the price because it's like less than 20 euros, but I think if you're taking your hobby this seriously and you really want to get into painting a little bit better and stuff like that, I would maybe fork out for the Vortex mixer, presuming that they work as good as advertised that people say on YouTube. And I am assuming that, right? So overall, I'd probably give it maybe like a 5 out of 10. I actually really like the build quality of it. It seems perfectly reasonable. I think the concept of the design is probably a little bit of an issue with the centrifugalness. Just made that word up. I'm presuming it exists. And just to say, I did try it with a mixing ball and one without. Didn't seem to make that much of a difference. They do recommend using the balls, but to me, it didn't seem to make that big of a difference. The footage was a little bit hard for me to get because I have such a small space and I'm sort of like in the process of setting up a bit more of a filming area. So do forgive me on that one if the footage isn't very good. Other than that, that's all I really have to say on the Green Stuff World Hobby Paint Shaker. Mixed feelings, unlike my paint, which perhaps wasn't that mixed. That's just a joke. It was mixed enough. But I think a Vortex mixer ultimately is probably a better choice for more people. Have you bought this? It is a new product. It's only recently out with Green Stuff World. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you already have a Vortex mixer? If you do, I would definitely not recommend coming to this, but if you're maybe thinking about jumping in, it might be an okay starter point. However, I said I would probably fork out for a Vortex mixer if I could go back in time and buy again. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.